Hey guys, welcome back to my channel once again. So, season 3 of The Mandalorian's out. We're already on episode 2. I did intend at one point to make a review of at least the first couple of episodes and give my opinion on what I thought. However, after watching the first episode and then the second one actually affected my opinion about the first one in a way, and it altered my opinion of the first episode. So I thought it'd be cool to sort of combine those two episodes into one and give you my original opinion of how the first episode went for me when the season first started, and then talk about how episode 2 sort of changed my mind on certain things and really kind of gave me a new perspective on where things are actually going. So this is a spoiler warning, and also possibly a spoiler warning for episode 3, if not the remainder of this season, but I'll get to that in a minute. So let's get started. So when episode 1 first came out, I was actually left a little bit underwhelmed. It just wasn't the big dramatic return that I was expecting it to be. It just really felt like Din was on one of his side missions and not something that was really clear or focused at first. But what sort of really set me off to the side was something that happened within the first 15 minutes of the episode, which I'm a little bit conflicted about because it has one of the coolest action scenes I've seen in like all of the Mandalorian story so far. I am referring to, of course, at the very beginning, we have this really cool scene where the Mandalorian cult is having this ceremony to anoint a youngling with his Mandalorian helmet. It goes immediately into this really cool monster fight as this big space crocodile mosasaur looking thing comes charging out of the depths, and you have a bunch of really cool Mandalorians all customized and unique in their own way fighting this giant monster, and it's really cool. Something I really enjoyed about this particular scene and in multiple areas of this episode was there were so many times I was left going, is that practical or is that CGI? I can't tell. And when it's that good, it's really good. And it's not just the aliens that we see at times, it's also scenes like at the very beginning when the Mandalorians are fighting this monster and they're shooting their grappling hooks at the monster's hide and it's like sticking in, and they got a close-up of its skin and it looks real, and I love that. Those kind of things, I really like that nice blend of practical and CGI, and it all worked very well for this particular scene. However, what it then transitions to is something that just put me off because it felt really repetitive. And I understand why they did it. It just sort of felt like the universe was taking itself out of itself to explain to the audience very repetitive information. Because for those who have watched like all the Star Wars content that has come out, you already understand that because Din revealed his face to Grogu and revealed that information to the armorer, he's been kicked out of his cult and they aren't letting him back in unless he goes and cleanses his body in the sacred waters that are in the mines of Mandalore. But from what Mando understands, those mines were destroyed in the great Mandalorian Imperial Purge. And his cult literally was just like, yeah, that sucks for you, but that's the way things are. But I understand not everyone watched the Book of Boba Fett, so it makes sense that this particular season goes out of its way to provide the back history information in their recap scene, where they literally give you that information at the start of the show. But then after you get through this battle scene with this monster, and Mando shows up to save the day, it literally goes into this exact same information again. And I probably get that, you know, people maybe skip the intro scene and miss the recap scene that they did there. But for me, it just really felt like the universe was stopping everything it was doing to turn to the camera and be like, okay, exposition time. And if the universe was actually acting like a real universe, what these characters would logically say is when Din shows up and has this exact same conversation, the armorer would just go, dude, we literally had this conversation like a week ago. Why are you back? You're not allowed to come back here. You need to go away. But we had this conversation. So why am I explaining this to you almost word for word again? Like, did you hit your head when you were taking your mask off, you charlatan? So in terms of like storytelling, it just sort of felt very out of place, and it just didn't have that kind of quality I was sort of accustomed to at this point, because all the other seasons, all the other shows that they've done so far, I've just been really pleased with how things have gone. And now it's just sort of like with this particular scene, I was just sort of like, this seems very unnecessary and just kind of illogical. Like, why? The only reason you came back was specifically to have this exposition scene for the people that didn't know, who didn't watch these other bits of information, and logically speaking, there's just no real reason for you to be back other than that. And it just doesn't flow right, doesn't mesh, right? But frankly, if that's the worst I can expect for the remainder of this season, I'm going to be left still pretty happy. So don't think that this is me thinking that this is the end. And it's literally by episode 2, I had this forehead slapping moment of, oh, that's right. When you allow the storytellers to tell the story, give them a chance to explain everything in full context, you understand some of the things that might confuse you at first. Oh, I'm sorry, Dave Filoni. How could I ever question your wisdom? And he's just like, you ingrate! Sorry, Filoni. I never should have doubted you. So by episode 2, Din is set out on his plan to see if Mandalore is actually poisonous and look for the mines of Mandalore and the sacred waters that he can clean himself with and redeem himself with. On this journey, he goes and meets with Bo-Katan, and right away we see what she's been doing since the last time we saw her in Mandalorian Season 2, which is to say nothing at all, because what it turns out is ever since Din got the Darksaber, her supporters left her. They took everything that she had acquired for them to sort of reunify the Mandalorian people, and they got the hell out of Dodge on their own quest and crusade because she wasn't able to get the Darksaber back. And in a way, that's kind of Din's fault. Not that he did it out of any kind of malicious intent, but because Dem's the rules. And it's later when she shows up to help Mando find the mines and the sacred waters is where we see something very interesting. Once they enter through the caverns and they find the sacred waters, she turns to a plaque that's still intact within, and she reads off it. And I can't remember the exact thing she says, but what she talks about is that these waters have been sacred since like the first Mandalorian, the man known as Mandalore, the guy the planet is named after and what all Mandalorians model themselves after, came here, and his legend has been known ever since because he slayed the legendary Mythosaur, the creature that is on the Mandalorian banner, the skull that is on the Mandalorian banner. And as Bo-Katan is reading off that plaque and explaining the back history and the importance and the significance of these sacred waters, Din is, taking off parts of his outfit, and he starts going into the water and reciting the same oath that he made when he was a youngling, like they were doing for the youngling at the very start of the show. But as he is reciting his oath, he is immediately pulled underwater, and Bo-Katan immediately jumps in after him and dives down really deep to go and save him. And I was actually having some Game of Thrones flashbacks, like, dude, you fell in the water like 3 seconds ago and you're like a mile under. Like, how did you sink that far that quickly? And it's as she makes it to the bottom and gets Din's body and brings him back to the surface, she sees something rather interesting. A living Mosasaur. And that's where I feel like the story has sort of revealed its intent for this season through the parallels at the very start of this story. Because if you really start looking at the parallels, look at episode 1. The very beginning of the episode has the Mandalorians performing this ritual, this sacred ritual in these waters before they are attacked by a giant monster. And by episode 2, Mando is going into these sacred waters and is attacked by a giant monster. But not just any monster, a legendary monster. A monster so renowned that it made the first Mandalorian a legend in their history for slaying it. And very recently, Bo-Katan has found herself in a position where no one is wanting to follow her anymore. So what I think this story has set up is they are going to have Bo-Katan want to try and slay the Mythosaur that's in these sacred waters to try and reinvent herself as this next Mandalore type figure, to regain support for her cause, to reunify the people, and maybe recolonize Mandalore. The only issue is probably that Din is going to want to go back to the cult and explain to them that yes, the planet is breathable, it's mildly hostile, but you have enough people here that you could probably establish some kind of small colony and hold it, and you're probably going to want to set up right next to these sacred waters. And by extent, you're probably also going to be big fans of the mythosaur, which is a legend to your people, and maybe not so keen on wanting to kill it the way Bo-Katan wants to. Ultimately, this is just my own personal fan theory. They could go anywhere with this. I don't know what the plan is going to be. I have to try and ground my expectations in reality and not hinge my enjoyment on what I am expecting to see, because I did that literally with episode 1 and I was proven so wrong. I went, oh wow, this didn't go where I was expecting, and now because I've given you the chance to explain yourself, I'm a lot more satisfied, especially now that I feel like the elements from episode 1 were all intentional to be parallels for episode 2 because it's leading somewhere. I am expecting to see Bo-Katan to have this desire to kill this mythosaur, to try and make herself into the kind of legend that Mandalore was, but I also foresee a conflict with the clan and her because neither of them seem to have high opinions of one another. If that doesn't happen, I'm interested in seeing where they will take the story. I just think based on the information that the show has provided us so far, this is the likely outcome and direction of where the show goes. If that turns out to be the case, I'm just happy I noticed these details and made the connection preemptively like that, because usually I'm just usually things are always kept so vague until like the later half of something like this that I'm just sort of like, I'm gonna wait and see how things play out because things are a little bit too vague. And then, you know, I might make my own little conclusions in the back of my head, but, you know, I don't bank everything. Needless to say, I was really pleased with episode 2. I think it really helped explain a lot of the issues away from episode 1, make things make a little bit more sense, and really give importance to some of those scenes that I had earlier criticized. I still feel like the exposition that they did was still a bit of not the best way they could have handled it, but ultimately that's so low on the totem pole of issues for me. It is almost not really worth bringing up so long as they don't overdo that. They don't keep doing stuff like that. I would much rather prefer that they find ways of just being like, yeah, we'll give like little bits of information to get the audience to understand. But if you want the full context, you need to watch the other episodes. You need to watch the other shows to understand what is going on. Frankly, I just don't see what would be wrong with that because, you know, everyone should just be watching all this Star Wars content. It's great content. Just watch it. But I am excited for episode 3. I really am hoping that this theory of mine turns out to be true. I would love to know what your guys' opinion of. What did you think of the first episode? What did you think of episode 2? Do you think my theory is grounded in reality? Do you think it's a possibility, or do you think it might go in a different direction? Frankly, I thought Bo-Katan was going to be going after the Darksaber a lot harder, but within episode 2, I mean, she literally used it to save Din's life from the big nightmare fuel eyeball robot monster, which, I mean, for anyone who has an issue with that thing, I point to General Grievous. Your argument's invalid. It's the weird robotic cyborg monster things that are all around the Star Wars universe. Like, get over yourself. It was cool, just nightmare fuel. Put that on a t-shirt. But I'd love to know your guys' opinion. Comment below. Let me know. If you like this video, I hope you give me a like and maybe a subscribe if you want to see more, and I hope to see you in the next one. See you. Bye.